My name is Angelo Lopez. I'm a Filipino-American political cartoonist based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I have the honor and the pleasure today to speak to Gail Thompson and Evan Hughes. Gail and Evan work on Cool Planet and Hotel de Zink, two groups within the Presbyterian Church that are working on climate change issues and homelessness issues. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to talk to me. Thank you both. Yeah. So I guess the first thing I just want to ask is, what is your background and stuff? And how did you both become members of First Presbyterian Church?
Gail, why don't you remember first?
All right. Well, it's a bit of a story, but I'll make it short. The First Presbyterian Church of Palo Alto, how I became a member there. I grew up in a Presbyterian church in Illinois, and then when I was in college, my church attending lapsed. So I was married, though, in 1964 in a church in Waukegan, Illinois, and it was Presbyterian, but not the one I attended. And we came back to California, and I thought, I need to really look at connecting with a church. And I came upon First Presbyterian Church, and I liked their openness and their progressive values at that time. And I particularly was impressed with George Wilson, the pastor at the time. He's one of my pastor heroes. So that's how I ended up at First Pres, and I've been there. I'm a senior, and so I know a lot of the history of the church and all that's gone on there, and it's been quite a journey, and it continues.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. I came to the church in 2008, although I had known of it and in fact had attended briefly way back in 1974. I knew of the church because of Robert McAfee Brown giving lectures at Occidental College while I was a assistant professor. No, while I was a grad student still. Robert McAfee Brown gave a series of 4 lectures on Albert Camus, but he told also about his own experience in civil rights work and being in the South in the civil rights movement, and being on the March at Selma, and so on. And he mentioned work in East Palo Alto, and he mentioned his church. And so when I was later up here, I had a job at SRI, and I attended the church during the George Wilson time. And then I took a job up in Sacramento and didn't return to First Presbyterian Palo Alto until I was actually, after I was retired and working, very interested in action on climate change and ending fossil fuels, and the Robert McAfee Brown lecture series had good speakers, and I came, I think I attended a couple of those, and then in 2008, I showed up one Sunday for a guess it was the Cool Planet Group, or yeah, it was called the Cool Planet Group, and Nan Swanson, who was the associate pastor at the time, was talking about Bible verses and scriptures that were relevant to the climate change issue, and I started coming regularly and joined the church at the end of that year.
Oh, cool, cool, cool. Yeah. I'm curious. You mentioned Robert McAfee Brown and George Wilson. Who are your heroes and heroines, and how did they influence you both?
Do you want me to go?
Oh, either one of you first.
Well, maybe I'll go, Evans, but had me to go first before, so maybe continue that pattern. But George Wilson, as I mentioned, and as Evan mentioned, he continued to the end of his life because he progressed. He continued to progress. He did not remain a church pastor, but he got into climate change. And at Ghost Ranch, he went to Ghost Ranch, and he got into that, a place that many of the people went to in, I think it was New Mexico. And so, and partnered with somebody in terms of the climate issues. So he got into that because he was a good theologian too, in his own way, and very personable. And also my heroes, well, in the church, Nan Swanson, she's made a hero for me for that work that she's done, sometimes behind the scenes, and also for her work in with the whole helping us get it connected to the Hotel de Zink. So she was very active with that. Also, Abby Mohop, she was an intern at the church for pastor. We in the past we had interns, and Abby was very climate oriented when she was here, and educated us and brought us up to date. And then she connected to Puente out in Pescadero, and we became connected to them. We had been, but we were more connected to them, and that they worked with the farm workers out there. And then she's moved on to the national scene, and she's back in Illinois now, and she's working nationally with climate change. And she was active at General Assembly, our twice a year, by yearly, no, every other year meeting, sorry. And when we come together as a all country Presbyterian church. So she is one of my heroes, a young one, and she's still out there doing that. Let's see, I have them written down. Well, of course, Greta Thunberg, and I don't need to mention her background. I think most of us know her. She was very impressive. One person can make a difference, and she certainly showed that with the work that she did, educating us. Al Gore, with his Inconvenient Truth, which is how Cool Planet got started, and I could elaborate on that later. And just all the people in our church who've done this work, and there's more that we don't know about. And the youth today, the youth that are coming forth, the youth we heard last Sunday, and when they were doing the sermon prompting with Mohan, one of the people in our church community who's worked globally and went to the Egypt this past year for the gathering of all the countries. And there's just quite a few people, but I want to acknowledge my my roots too. My grandmother in particular, from my Lithuanian grandmother, who was very took in animals, birds that fell out of trees, and fed them with droppers, that kind of thing. In climate, and where I grew up, we walked, we took streetcars and buses, but we through thick and thin. And so we just grew up living within nature and in the environment. So there's many others, and I think I haven't answered them, but I'll move on to Evan.
Oh yeah. So I guess that helped you with your love of nature.
Yes, and animals. I have a deep love of animals and all of nature, and all that the people have done. Oh my gosh, Jane Goodall,
Yeah, yeah.
what she's done, and just so many people. I know I'm leaving a lot of people out.
Oh, that's okay. If you remember, you can mention them later. Yeah, yeah. Evan, who are your heroes and heroines?
Um, in a way, I think I named my mother first for having been so dedicated to the family and through hard times with a husband that as she put it, I thought that what would hold us together was our Christian faith, and instead it drove us apart. It was because my
Oh,
father became in the Billy Graham campaign of 1948 in Los Angeles, became a devout, rabid evangelical Christian fundamentalist,
yeah, yeah,
and felt that what he needed to do was to bring people to Christ,
yeah,
and and that, and eventually he quit having a regular job so he could spend time witnessing for Christ and converting people, kind of and he joined various groups and he did one-to-one witnessing. Anyway, the result was that my mother went to work with our as a secretary for our family doctor, and got us through all those years.
yeah.
And I now I now see some of her reflections in her Bible, which I have and which I use for bringing the Bible to church, and so when I'm
Oh.
reading the lectionary passage, I often find her comments on the text. I
Does
also
it
have
help you with discussions? When you read her comments, does it help you with the discussions or?
it's been helpful in the Bible studies that Jane's been running on the Psalms recently.
Oh, okay, okay.
Jane is our transitional pastor at
Oh,
the
okay,
church.
okay. Yeah.
Uh, then I certainly Robert McAfee Brown was uh, a hero. I didn't know him personally because I came to the church after long after he had died, but I was very inspired by his combination of theology, Christian life, and social action and scholarship, um, from the time that I heard him back when I was a grad student. 1966 was when I heard him,
Oh,
and he preached at the Pasadena Presbyterian Church the same week that he was down for those lectures at Occidental College.
okay.
Um, Occidental College was kind of a family college. My mother and all of her brothers had gone there, and we had church picnics on the campus. So it was a
Oh,
place
okay.
I knew from, and it was a neighbor of Caltech.
Oh, okay.
In fact,
Okay.
my worst night as a football player for Caltech was when Occidental beat us 70-14 or something one Friday night.
I'm sorry about that.
um,
What
uh,
position did you play?
Fullback, end, and guard. It looked like we had a three deep team, but if you read the names, you'd find that the first string that was the second string something else.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Uh,
Angelo, I thought two more people I want to add. Debbie Mytels, whom Evan knows, she's very active in the Palo Alto area. Has a lot of connections. She was the head of Actera, a local environmental group, and
uh,
she's the head of Peninsula Interfaith Climate Action called PICA, which I don't attend anymore, and I think Evan still attends. And she brings
yes,
together people from different communities and has people come in and connects us. And she puts out messages, and I'm still on the message link and keep in contact with her, that if we want to sign a petition, add our name to a PICA petition, she will put it in.
Okay.
So, and her and Peter Dreckmeyer, a longtime friend of mine who was very active in the environment, and he was very active environmentally as when he was the mayor of Palo Alto, and his family were connected to First Presbyterian Church, and his dad was a professor at Stanford, and they were close to the Brown family, Robert McAfee Brown, and Peter used to be in the house when they were having all these discussions as a child and hear all this stuff. Yeah. And his parents actually have plaques in our memorial garden, Margot and Charles Dreckmeyer. So I'm going to give a shout out to Peter.
Oh, okay, cool.
And Debbie. We call her Debbie.
Thank you. Yeah, well,
very good names.
Yeah, since we're talking about the environment and stuff, I guess this is a good time to ask, what exactly is Cool Planet? What are some of the activities of Cool Planet, and what's its history and stuff? Since it's something you both work on.
Well, I thought Evan was one of the original members because I was not, but it sounds like he might not have been. But I'll let him talk about the beginning because I was not. I was working and doing other things and have family in the area. So, but I always cared about the environment, and I always, back to 1970, I, was doing things that came out in a little handbook that a local person had published. And so I tried to recycle as much as I could. And they started too with a group. And what I had heard, they heard Al Gore speak at Stanford, and this could be incorrect, but Al Gore had an effect on, one person told me, on Susan Chamberlain, one of the early people in the Cool Planet group, and said, well, why don't we do something after hearing Al Gore speaking about the need? So they started Cool Planet. And Nan Swanson was very involved with that. I can remember seeing a photo, which I didn't have, of the original group because they gathered together. And there were several of them that, in our church community, some that, that got started. And so some others joined. And we have our different areas of expertise within the group. Like Janet Cox, she's very politically minded and keeps tabs on bills in the state and nationally too, and keeps us informed, because that's a big job when you're tracking what's going on in the chambers, so legislatively. And she's connected to 350.org nationwide. And
what is that?
Well, that was the group started by Bill McKibben, the environmental group.
Okay.
And he's Bill McKibben's an environmental activist.
Oh, okay.
Sage too.
Okay.
So we were very privileged in that one photo that you had of having him come and preach at our church, and it was through Janet that we got him to come. And then we had this huge reception that was pre-COVID. So those were my memories of how it started. And we do harvest. Derek and Craig have a harvest festival every year, but they haven't had some during COVID. But it's going to come back this year in November, and they have different groups, fair trade types of groups, and from different parts of the world that sell their goods. And then Cool Planet has had a table of, and you give donations of used goods. So and you can buy them from the Cool Planet group. You can give however much money you want to give for these donations. So we raise money by, recycling, reusing, that kind of thing, which is really good, and that's part of all of it. And then we've supported our operations, which is that much, but we've got a budget that we had for different groups that we've supported around the country, and we do have connect to groups that we learn about and from, and locally, and we've done some nationally. For instance, I don't think we have in recent years, but this always impressed me too, that we donated to West Virginia at one time. I forgot the name of the group. That's where they were trying to get out of the use of earning a living by mining coal. and
Oh,
they
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
retraining the people that back there. So we donated money to them, as not a lot, but we would donate to that, and that
Yeah.
showed people there that we cared, and maybe gave them some support.
Oh,
So
okay.
anyhow, that's what I recall, and I'll let Evan talk more about it. But we're in a little bit of a hiatus now, to be perfectly honest,
Oh,
because we haven't met. They met recently, but I didn't go and I found out from somebody it was just sort of getting together on the patio after church to just connect with one another.
oh.
Uh, and a lot of the people right now, because we are a small congregation, we're not as large as we used to be. The
Oh,
same people that were going to go to the social justice ministry meetings were a lot of the people that were connected to the Cool Planet meetings too. Oh, and we are a Earth Care Church. This is a big deal. Pat Kenny always reminds us of this. We have a certification, and we've been one of the first to be certified
oh.
nationwide, because they have criteria that we have met in terms of
Oh,
upgrading our church plant to meet environmental standards they have set.
oh,
And
cool.
we've progressed, but we still have work to do. And of course, when you're in a church and you have a budget and different committees, you have to figure out where it's all going to go.
Oh,
And
yeah,
we've
yeah.
had debates and discussions about that. We have one heat pump at the church that somebody else gave to the church, and then we have the light fixtures have all been changed, all of that kind of thing. We've been early on with a lot of that.
Oh,
And so anyhow, but we are very connected, and who's to say when we'll become quite active again. It's
And
not that, and you find out more and more people in the church community they really care about it, but they don't know how to maybe don't know how to act. You find out how they've acted, with their fossil fuel
yeah,
free cars and that kind of thing, and in their own home environments.
yeah,
And I'm a person, and I'll say this right now, I believe in micro actions and macro type of actions, the small little daily things we can each do, but the bigger things that we have to do and continue to work on. It's not an either or for me.
yeah.
And that Sidney Brown was very I follow Sydney's path, I think, when I do that. So
yeah,
Evan, I hand it over to you in regard to Cool Planet.
yes. uh, uh, as I said, I first came to the church in 2008 because I knew that there was a group doing something on climate change. And that's when Nan Swanson, the associate pastor, was speaking to the group. And immediately thereafter, Bill McKibben was giving a lecture, I think City Arts and Lectures up in San Francisco, uh, on one of his books had just come out. And I got 2 tickets, and I tried to reach out to by email, I guess, to people whose names I had in Cool Planet, and Janet Cox is the one who replied and said that she would use that other ticket. So
Yeah.
she came over by BART, and I met her outside the lecture, I guess at the Civic Center in San Francisco, and we had seats in the front row. I think it was very crowded. uh, and so that was how I met Janet. And I, like Gail, I've been very impressed with how much action she has taken. She's been on the committee looking at how the church can improve the kitchen and other energy uses and in our facilities. And she has also, as Gail mentioned, she follows state legislation, and she's actually set up a group called Climate Action California.
Yeah.
So among local people at the church, I guess she's a conspicuous hero for us on working on climate change.
It sounds like you have a lot of heroes in your church. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a cool thing. A lot of people who are inspirational.
yeah. I'm also active, and Gail too has been attending early church group. and the leader there is Byron Bland, and he's another local hero in the church for his role in leadership of that.
Oh, okay.
And that's a group that I felt that it's the Bible study group at the church that I've been active in, because we work with the lectionary passages each Sunday. The leadership rotates. Byron leads more often than any other single person, but there's a leadership group,
Yeah.
and we discuss the passages from the selected passages from the liturgy,
Oh, cool, cool.
the
So,
revised common liturgy.
the,
What's the word?
yeah, I'm not sure what it's called. Stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah. I enjoy I've
like
been going there for I don't know how many years, but I've learned a lot.
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I'm curious now. Now, since I talked about Cool Planet, um, you know, what about Hotel de Zink? What is its what do you do in Hotel de Zink? And you know, what is its activities and stuff. But I got a message saying we'll be ending in 10 minutes. So after this talk, if you want to continue, I'll download the video. But I guess I can first ask about Hotel de Zink.
Yes. Um, I think I volunteered first to do one day to help with the breakfast one day in 2009, I think it was,
Oh, okay.
and and I I met Paul Jones there, and I'm not sure if Gail was there the very first day that I happened to show up. But what happened was that eventually, very quickly, um, the breakfast crew was Paul Jones and me and Gail,
Oh,
and and we in a way we got roles. My role was making the toast,
oh.
so, so I was in the kitchen.
What
Uh,
year was that?
2009.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Gail, do you think you were active with the three of us that first year, that long ago?
I tried to remember that, and I think I might have come in about that time.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I remember the three of us for years and years.
I remember the three of us from years and years. Yes.
What exactly do you do in Hotel de Zink?
It's organized by at least a county-wide, multi-county organization called Life Moves. It's had other names at times in the past. And what it does locally is 12 different churches uh, take in homeless people to sleep in the church overnight for 1 month. I think at times, at least one church might have been doing 2 out of the 12 months. But we've always done the month of July until COVID came along. So I think I counted about 10 years at least that we've been doing this. We meaning me and Gail and Paul doing the breakfast, and I would. Uh, but that's what it is. It provides shelter, and it's structured in that uh, people are screened to be participants in it, and I think part of the intention is that that 3 months in this program will enable them to do a transition into housing and a job. In fact, many of them already have a job when they're in there, but they don't have enough money to pay rent. And so for some people, being in this program for 3 months enables them to save up money to you know make a down payment or deposit on a
Yeah.
rental unit, and get off of be housed that way. So it's a group of churches that are doing this in other months, and Gail's role, in my view, has been while Paul and I are working in the kitchen, she's been out in the main fellowship hall where people have been put out their cots or bedding on pads overnight, been sleeping. The group is always at least 12 people, and it can go up to 20 people. Say somewhere between those is the number of people that were usually there overnight.
Oh, okay.
And Gail would be out near the table where people come up to get food and then go to the tables and sit down and eat. And I've observed many times Gail's in conversation with people doing her social work.
Yeah, I think that's important, just to make them feel at home, right?
Mhm.
And stuff,
Yes,
so that it's not an impersonal thing. It's more personal.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I've had very nice personal interchanges with a much smaller number because it's
Uh,
people that happen to wander into the kitchen and talk to me and Paul in the kitchen.
uh.
Uh, it seemed to me that I was making toast until people left, but Paul usually finished with setting out the sandwich materials and the coffee, and so he would be out with Gail more of the time than I was.
Oh, okay. It sounds like all three of you, it was a very, all three of you played integral roles.
Yeah, yeah. We lost Paul this past year. He
Yeah,
died at age 93.
yeah, yeah. So is it just you two right now?
Well,
It's
no, we're
different now.
not doing the breakfasts anymore. We
Oh,
don't do the breakfasts.
okay.
They get breakfast over at the Opportunity Service Center now, where the management, a case manager over there of the people is assigned the management of the Hotel de Zink operation, excuse my voice. And so they go over there for breakfast now.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
But I think, Evan, were you through? I was going to add to Evan, I think a lot of, I mean, Nance Swanson, who Evan mentioned, found an opening when one of the faith communities gave up a slot in July to host, because we weren't one of the original 12. You know, it had been going on for a bit. And so we took that slot, and Nan was the one that did, you know, got us going in that. And so you know, we've been doing it, I think, that long. I mean, it was a long time, and it stopped before the breakfasts stopped before COVID, because they kept data. They keep data on that, which was good, about how many people came to see their case managers, because they were supposed to connect with them, and so some of them would go to work, which they understood. But the others would just slack off. They'd already eaten, and so they wanted to bring them all together in this Opportunity Service Center so they could connect with them. And I think that's working would work better. And it's progressed over the years. We've seen how it's worked. We've got many stories, and you certainly learn that people come from very many walks of life. You know, there's there many people you would never recognize if you saw them on the street as being unhoused or unsheltered. One time I heard that some people are very sensitive about the word homeless because of the stigma put towards that word. So I try not to use it, but I use it too. So
Yeah.
anyhow, it's got a bad history. I went back and looked at the history, and you can Google it, because I know it was named after a former police chief in Palo Alto.
The
And
zinc.
also I know it started with the urban ministry, which was near the Red Cross building over by the train station on
Oh,
University Avenue at the time, where they would So it came out of Jim Berkalow, a faith leader in the Palo Alto community, not at First Pres.
What are the rewards of working in Cool Planet and Hotel de Zink? And what would you want people to know about climate change and homelessness? But I'll let you talk first, Evan, and then after you get off the because I know you have to get to the doctor's
Yes,
meeting.
yes,
After
please.
that, I'll talk to Gail.
I'm learning a lot from Evan too that I didn't know about him.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what's your question? What have I learned from?
Yeah, what are your rewards,
Oh,
to
yeah,
you
what my
personally? What have you
reward?
gotten out of it?
The greatest reward is working with people who have a common interest, a common or mostly common Christian faith and background, and then a common interest right now in the activities of Cool Planet and Hotel de Zink. In the case of Hotel de Zink, the activity is providing this overnight shelter. And in the case, most of the years that we did it, we serving breakfast, and the joy in it was doing that in that environment. Paul Jones was special in this, in that he bought extra food for the breakfast, and he did the shopping starting at the Menlo Park Safeway at 5 a.m. And since I live in Menlo Park, I would meet him there. And but he was the one that purchased all these extra things.
Yeah.
And
it sounded like something that you loved to do. It wasn't something you were required to do, but it was something you loved.
Right. Yeah. I found on July mornings when we're not, now that it's over,
Yeah.
I miss it.
Yeah.
So it's July. I should be up at 4:45.
Oh, okay. Well, what did you learn about that experience that you would want people to know about? Like, what did you learn about homelessness, or what did you learn about climate, or just what did you learn about serving that you would want people to know?
As Gail had mentioned before, it was surprising that some people with great talent and ability can find themselves in this homeless or unhoused circumstance due to a financial need.
Yeah.
That as yeah, Paul Jones was always careful to refer to our guests, and he
Yeah.
was always reminding himself and us that those that would get in conversation with us in the kitchen, he would say, I know that I could be where you are if things had happened differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to give you time to get to your doctor's appointments. I want to say goodbye to you and thank you very much for taking part in this talk and stuff. And I wish you well in your doctor's appointment and stuff.
Okay.
Yes, you could update us tomorrow, Evan.
Yeah, it's a follow up with a specialist. Make sure I comment on it at early church, Gail.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you both. I enjoyed this. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So Gail, you said you said you wanted to talk a little bit more about Hotel de Zink and stuff. I interrupted you before I had to cut off the first Zoom meeting. So go ahead and add what you wanted to add about what.
Well, I thought the history was really interesting, and anybody can go and Google it, but it actually was named after a police chief in the early 30s, and because he was very supportive of this woman in particular in Palo Alto. let's see, I have printed it out myself.
Oh,
During the
okay.
Great Depression, it started when she saw a lot of people coming through Palo Alto that were called, not very nice names back then, which we can
Oh,
still do today with some people who are unsheltered,
yeah.
and she thought that there was food being wasted. She found out, she checked with restaurants in downtown Palo Alto. So she found a way to get the food to the people. She first became interested in this by listening to, I don't know what she heard on the Amos and Andy show. That was an old time radio show.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was on for a long time. I remember hearing about it. Uh, so she got these restaurants to save this food, and she got her husband involved too, and they found a place for people to stay. Uh, and the city pitched in at the time. I'm just going through it briefly, and got
Yeah.
others from benevolent community members, including the famous writer Kathleen Norris, to get involved.
Oh, wow.
And they had 100 cases. They collected food. And this is stuff we're still doing today in our church, with our food closet.
Oh,
We provide dinners now for the Hotel de Zink. Only dinners. They come in July and they get dinner every night
oh.
at our church.
Do
And I
you do
can
that? Do you serve the dinners and stuff, or
various people sign up on the link, and I provided 2 dinners, and I was a host, so I kept in contact with a couple of other people that did. And then I decided I knew the Methodist Church was having this before we did. I decided they're having some trouble finding people over there because aging population and the cost of food
um,
and the numbers this year after COVID, because they had to cut back so the people were spaced during COVID in Fellowship Hall. We would often have like 20 people, which was the max.
yeah.
And cooking for, say, 12 versus 20 is a lot.
Oh,
And
okay.
sometimes people couldn't cook, so they'd buy meals, and serve good, nutritious meals as much as possible. Because, if you're in, say, a senior residence, it isn't always easy to cook, or it
Yeah.
isn't easy to cook for a large group. I found that out
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So I did the last dinner with the Methodist Church, and there was some carryover there that I won't
Oh,
elaborate. But I thought, I'm sort of an out there community type of person. And I thought, this problem doesn't just, I need to just go to the Methodist Church. I felt a calling to go there because, this problem is beyond. There's a need over there, I felt, and then I
yeah.
connected with people over there. So, and some of the people, when they came to First Press, then they knew
Oh,
about
okay.
us. So anyhow, I wanted to let you know that. And so it's still going on that we're trying to provide stuff. But what they did in those old days, they provided a live cow. We don't do that.
Gail, I'm curious. I noticed when Evan talked about how you talked to a lot of the people, the guests and stuff, and you were a nurse, right? Is part of serving for you one of the rewards just the personal connection with people? Is that
Yes, because that's my background, my educational background. I'm an RN, a clinical
yeah,
specialist, and I worked in a mental health, and I taught students. One example of that, I've been in really rough areas of San Francisco, the
yeah,
Tenderloin. I've been around a lot of that. I I've got a very home care and hospital, so I know, and I know a lot about the homeless. And like Evan said, I mean, if it'd been like this today with the cost of housing and everything, I could, one live paycheck to paycheck. I did
yeah.
not come from an educated background in my family. I'm one of the first, in the immediate family to graduate from college. My grandparents were immigrants. So I understand that, and I understand what it was like growing up because of where I grew up in the
Yeah, yeah,
immigrant area.
yeah,
And so I just have it within me. That was always something within me. I don't know where all it comes from, but I think
yeah,
it's really important to get out there, to serve,
yeah,
and to use what you feel, where you feel you can make a difference. But
yeah,
anyhow, so that was my Hotel de Zinc, and what I hope people get from Hotel de Zinc, and I think they do, because we've been providing these dinners all these years. uh, that's that's gets the most people involved in the church with these dinners and the different types of work that needs to be done behind the scenes. There's a lot of work that I don't need to go into. And I want to give a shout out to Joyce Weiser, who's done some of this work for many years, many years, and
Oh,
has it in her heart. You know, she's very food oriented, and I think she and I know share the same beliefs. I believe in providing that people need the basics to, and we should all have the basics. And
yeah,
we're providing what little we can with that. I mean, you know, to people to sleep on a hard floor on mattresses, you know, that's not ideal, but
yeah,
it is providing something. We need to provide food. We need to provide clothing. And at the Opportunity Service Center now, where I go monthly to do an event, a fun event, but it's also interacting with people. It's bingo birthday. They have clothing over there that people can have. And whenever anything goes awry in our community, you know, people say, oh, contact the Opportunity Center, or, you know, they still say that, but it's now the Opportunity Service Center.
yeah,
So, and food, clothing, shelter,
yeah,
these are basics that are just, you know, it's not working right now. And I'm an adamant person that believes in healthcare for all. I
yeah.
have to throw that out there. And so that's my passion. And I like any place, Angelo, most of the people are very nice, very kind, but they have problems. And you can imagine when you get a group of people staying in a small space like that, there's going to be some conflicts.
Oh,
And
yeah.
people have some illnesses. And over the years, we've had some things. And often in the mornings when we were doing the breakfasts, it worked out. So we all just sort of decided. And, you know, Paul was a leader with this too, because he was very active, very active in the church, you know, on session, our governing board. We just decided, okay, I mean, this is done. We don't need to be elaborating about this, because sometimes people might think, oh my gosh,
Oh, no,
but we
no.
have
And
had
I
things
think it's
happen. We've
important.
had a pipe burst, you know, in the night, and some people going in there and finding, you know, blood
Oh,
in the
no.
kitchen and that kind of thing. So anyhow, that's part of my passion.
Yeah,
And
I asked Evan about this. What for you? What are the rewards for you and stuff? Is just serving? It sounds like you've learned a lot from these
well,
experiences.
I feel like I'm also using my education in many ways, because I do use my communication skills, and and I still feel like I'm active in
Oh,
many
okay.
ways, because I'm also on the Care and Compassion Ministry at our church. So that is part of the reward. Part of the reward is learning when they move on and they get housing.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to tell you that the Hotel de Zink was supposed to end this year, and now I know it's going through next year, because they have kept data, and this is not the best way to reach these visitors, and the Opportunity Service Center. They're called clients, you know, because
Yeah.
they have case managers. So they're going to put in a new shelter, a temporary one where they can stay, I think, up to 6 months, maybe longer, at the
Oh,
end of San Antonio Road, like the shelter in Mountain View. There's a state program, a home key type of
yeah,
program.
yeah.
So hopefully
I have a
that'll get
friend
going.
who's homeless who's there. I have a friend
Yes.
who's homeless
And
who's
you
there
know,
right
some
now.
people, it can get, I think, and if you ever wanted to visit the one in Mountain View, you probably could, you know, and we've taken tours of that, some of us. So hopefully that'll get going, and then we won't have, well, where they're not sure what's going to happen with the hotel. I can still see people showing up there, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so showing up at the community Opportunity Service Center,
Oh,
because, as I said, it's now managed out of there. But
yeah.
we've had our challenges over the years. There's no doubt about it, and there are good. Most of the, I mean, 90+% of the people that come through are very good people, you
Oh,
know. And you know, when people get fearful of something or something, they'll dump on the lowest people on the chain, and usually it's the people out on the streets. And there are some that you know, there are like bad apples, you know, in any area. I hate to say that, but it's true. But very few of that.
Yeah.
And when those issues can get resolved and they move on and they become healthier, I can see
Sounds
that.
very rewarding.
It's very rewarding. It's when you're in healthcare too. You're
Yeah.
trained to, you know,
Yeah.
it's not that you're saving them or something like that. I don't believe in that, but you're working with them to have them be responsible from themselves. And like in the early days, they had rules. When I was starting to give you the history, they have rules and they have chores to do too, to clean up and that kind of thing and do their best. Now I want to just focus on this year because this was a good year
Yeah.
for the dinners, and I was over there a lot. I kind of take over some of the other responsibilities, and they're just seeing that we don't try to prevent food waste, but sometimes that happens. What they eat, it's
Yeah.
not just the breakfasts, because on weekends we provide breakfast food for them because they aren't provided breakfast at the Opportunity Service Center. And I bought this stuff and I bought lunch food for them to carry and that kind of thing. And we had wonderful, wonderful guests, a couple, a man and a woman and a couple of women, and they just really were took charge and communicated, and it was just wonderful to have that. And I was able, when I know the executive director, he's been there for a long, long time over at the Opportunity Service Center. And I said, a great group of people were there this year. And a lot of people felt that. And he was going to tell them. And I've seen changes in how they approach it and how they've loosened up the rules and let people have more responsibility. It's an ongoing movement, this Life Moves. And if you've heard about that and Home Key, then it's changing. So it's not stuck, which is good because it's progressing, and they're looking at what works and doesn't work, and using figures and data, numbers.
Oh, that's cool.
So
that's cool.
So it's rewarding when they work out, and it's rewarding. You have to take your cues from them. Some people don't want to talk to you. Some, they just. Can you imagine having to haul your stuff around? They can leave stuff there and get everything together and all of that.
Well, I used to work in the
fun, but
library.
to a certain degree. That's just
Yeah.
hard. One thing I want to say about this in terms of healthcare, they do have a clinic over at the Opportunity Service Center where they can be served. It's got the name of one of the founders, Dr. Don Barr, up above it, because he was there. And we as a church were very helpful in supporting the Opportunity Service Center getting built. And there are bricks in front of it with various church people's names on it that donated money to get that going. And our church was very instrumental. And I look at that and I see the old names. I know we put a brick, but I can't see it. But I think, well, that's good. Maybe they walked over it a lot and it got worn out, So, but lots and lots of history there.
Well, if they do that, they'll fix the brick so they can see the name again.
A shout out to many people in the past history of our church. And I do think that, did you want to know anything more about the Hotel de Zink?
Oh, no. You continue with whatever you were saying. I was going to ask next about your experience with Robert McAfee Brown and stuff, because you wanted to mention a little bit about him, but finish what you were saying first.
Yeah. I think that, I think about them sometimes and where they would be today with all of this going on, and as Evan mentioned about with him, there's a lot of history that his involvement in many activities. But I do not think of Bob Brown by himself anymore. I know many people do, because I became such even closer friends with his wife, Sydney, after Bob died. Another woman and I became very close to her.
Can I ask you though? I don't know if all of the viewers know much about Robert McAfee Brown. Could you tell me just a little summary about him first? And then after that, just let me know about your experiences with both him and his wife.
Okay. This book I told you about, Reflections Over the Long Haul, is really a great memoir of him. And I think it's probably still out there.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot about him. But I wanted to take some information that summarizes some of it. I know this is a copyrighted book, so I'm paraphrasing it. I don't want to, this is from the foreword in the book is from William Sloane Coffin, was another great theologian
Yeah.
too. There were several of them. He's up there with the great theologians of the world.
Yeah.
His theology was liberation theology, and what he said in this foreword was one of the greatest public theologians of his day. He was a pacifist in World War II, but towards the end of the war, he joined the Navy and became a chaplain in the Navy. But then later, I remember he was at Stanford at the time. They moved around a lot, in different places. You read this history, you'll find it out. As Evan said, and I couldn't remember that he'd been down in Occidental, but they were at Stanford too, and he aligned himself with students to resist the draft and protest the Vietnam War. Now, for me at that time, I had babies, was pregnant and having other babies, and in our church, if we weren't out there doing the protesting, we could support them, and give them emotional support and whatever we could give. Now, there are other people in this community I know of, and some who have passed on and some who are still around who knew them more. They were more connected to Stanford at the time.
Yeah.
And that Vietnam War was very divisive at that time. I mean, it was difficult. And some people actually left the church, but they took this faith stand. So and George Wilson was the pastor then, and I looked through the book and I saw the photos of those who stood in. They were all men clergy dressed in black suits or whatever, and with Robert McAfee Brown standing before the draft board office protesting in San Mateo, and George Wilson was one of the protesters, and George Wilson traveled too. He went on the Freedom Ride to Selma. To Bob Brown did, and he fought for farm workers' rights. I touched upon now that he and Sydney and others in our church community went down to Delano years ago with Cesar Chavez in the Farm Workers Union to support the grape boycott. So if those of us in the church community, we didn't buy any grapes, even if we didn't go down there, we did buy grapes to support it, no grapes allowed. And he did so much important work out there in the world. He met with the Pope. There's a picture of him with Pope Paul. He did a lot of interreligious dialogue among Protestant Jews and Roman Catholics. I mean, very accepting of whoever. So it's and as he said, and this is me too, he was a modest person, very talented. They had a place in Massachusetts where his ashes were scattered, and I think Sydney's too, and then they scattered his ashes in Scotland after he was born. He built the house back there, the cottage, and they would go there every summer as a family, because Sydney really pushed that. They needed to come together because this was hard work that he was doing, and to be connected to his children and out there in nature. Out there in nature, with his, saw and all building and growing grapes and all, I mean, blueberries and all of that kind of thing. Because Sydney, it was hard on Sydney and the children because, they were here sometimes when he was away, and they had, say FBI knocking on the door sometimes. And, they wouldn't know if he was safe, when he was out there doing this civil rights work and all of that kind of thing. So,
I think activism has its costs.
He's very, very active, very active. And so he was shy. I didn't know him that was others, but I knew him, and I would hear sometimes he would give a sermon in the church, and it was really pretty, made you think, high level, and I know that some of the teenagers thought, because we'd let him out early at the time. But he was a very modest person too, and he kept progressing. He taught himself to play the cello when he was 60. and he loved baseball. And I think he was a Giants fan. I don't know, maybe. I mean, hopefully, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Well, since
he
you
and
had
Sydney, I want to stress for me, he and Sydney were very much partners because she was as active in her own way as he was. In
uh,
Palo Alto, we have King Plaza.
yeah,
After Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King.
yeah,
And that's very powerful to me. And this is for me, it's Robert, aka Bob Brown,
yeah,
and Sydney Brown. They were a pair together.
yeah. Since
And what
Sydney, yeah, I'm curious. Since Sydney had such an influence on you and stuff, how did she affect you and stuff? I mean, what was, it sounds like Sydney had more. You became impressed with Sydney, right, and stuff. How was her influence on you?
Sydney, for some people, she had a strong will. She grew up in China. Her parents were missionaries, by the way, and they were in China when the Japanese attacked it and had to get out of China. So I think she was influenced by her parents and missionary work that they did too. But she was so she had her own thing. She started Mid Peninsula Citizens for Fair Housing. If you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
any place with her in the community, I mean, she just knew the people. She reached out to the workers.
yeah,
Uh, she was in the trenches, kind of thing with people. She just had that about her,
yeah,
and she accepted people for whom they were. And when Bob, they had his service at the church when Bob passed away, and then he had another one in Heath, Massachusetts. I couldn't go because it was on a Saturday and I was working in the hospital that day. But my husband, who he and Cindy communicated because she sensed something in people that they would listen to her, and he's a listener too,
oh,
about South Africa because the company he was working for was beginning to do business there, but trying to do it fairly, but sometimes people just say, oh my gosh, nothing, don't do anything there.
yeah,
Sydney would try to find out more about it and understand it and listen. And she had my husband be one of the ushers at his
yeah, yeah.
service, which was very, very long. I think it was like a 4 hour service or so. So I heard part of it. But one thing that impressed me about him, he, like many great minds, it's really sad when their mind starts going away and then affects their body and all of that kind of thing towards the end. We
Yeah,
had a group that went down to the border at Tijuana, and I went at the time as part of that group to visit the maquiladoras down there when they were being,
yeah,
looking at how they did with the workers and the conditions down there, and the American companies and other companies, and then go to a place, start something, and then leave for another place,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that kind of thing. And so Sydney and Bob went on this trip, but we could tell that he was declining a bit, and
Oh.
she was just taking care of him. I mean, she was just like right there, and I mean, they were such a team, and their children would tell you that too. They have wonderful children and
Yeah,
grandchildren, activists kind of thing. She supported whatever was their passion and what they want to do in
yeah.
life.
I
I
wish I
mean,
got
there
to know
wasn't
her
all
better.
the pressures on them. They were simple people. They lived simply. Sydney had us in her home, after Bob died, and we would go there for a book group, and we would have
Yeah,
interesting discussions. And I just, and we would go. This other person that was active in the church and left at the time, Norma Branch, and she left, and so but at that time we would go out and take Sydney out for coffee after Bob left, before she eventually she moved out of her house, and we go on California Avenue, and we go into a place over there, and she connected with the workers. She would always work. Oh, hi there. She was just very connected to the workers. I
yeah,
would tell you one quick story about her that affected me deeply because when they were down in Delano, there was this other woman in the church. The first person I ever met which is a wonderful woman, Patsy Evans Weiss. And she came from I think a fairly well-to-do family out of, maybe from Texas, I'm not sure. So she would go down there, and Cindy said, I would go and talk to the people in the fields, because that was my, that was me, and Patsy would go talk to the owners, of these fields. And she could handle that really well and turn on her charm, and she knew exactly what she was doing. So they took their strengths that they had and approached people with respect and kindness.
That's cool.
Respect and kindness.
Yeah.
And Cindy could be sharp at times, but sometimes sometimes she affected some people that way. But when I worked in different places, and I go to Oakland, I went to Oakland when I was working. I mentioned some group or something there, and they said, "Oh yeah, we know. Do you know Sydney Brown? We know Sydney Brown." I mean, she was just amazing. So I say Bob and Sydney Brown. That's my recollection.
Oh, okay. Well,
and he even wrote a song, a song that's in our hymnal.
Oh, good.
Brown.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah. Well, we have 4 minutes left for this meeting. Before we go and stuff, is there any last minute word that you want to express about, like, what would you want people to know, or about the work that you do, or just how your faith has helped you serve?
I can turn to my faith, and I think I I learned a lot from early church.
Yeah.
You attend, and where we listen to each other. We all come from different backgrounds, and we accept one another. We listen to one another, and I realize we're all different. And I just said to somebody the other day, I said, I've been in different countries where people have, majority of a different faith. I mean, I believe in the teachings of Jesus, but a lot of what we have in our Bible and the teachings, came from the Greeks too. So I, do reading about that. But I believe in those teachings. But I also think it's important, with all this fighting and peace that we need, and Sydney and Bob would be out there working for peace and working for refugees, and working today. I think they would focus on climate. I'm not sure, because we are in a crisis, and we're all in this together. There is no escaping that. And if we argue about faith and beliefs, I mean, we all come from the same God.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe in God, well, we're all together on this. And so we need to work together and find solutions. And as I said in a meeting yesterday, we can do the micro things for the climate, like, I mean, the simple thing I've been doing since COVID, and I won't go back to it. I used to, use paper napkins, kind of thing. I've been using my old cloth napkins that I sewed when I used to sew when I was many years ago. And just whatever you can do at that level, and to support electrification and not using fossil fuels, and mass transportation, and walking more, and letting your kids walk. I'm grateful I grew up when I could be free range, but I had to be home at a certain time, or else it was big deal trouble.
Well, thank you.
So anyhow, but we were in this together, and to respect one another's beliefs, and to love one another. That's what Jesus teaches us. We all need to love one another. And sometimes it's, and to work on when we have difficulty, when we love one another, we aren't able to love one another like we might, but it's understandable, because we're human beings.